Hello there, and welcome back to our Alpine speedrun. Today, I'm going to be focusing on the second part, where we're going to be doing a few more races and kind of developing the car further, getting mentality up, and also fixing the issue of Ocon absolutely destroying the car last time around. So, let's see if we can score some points this time. We were really, really close last time around, but it just didn't work out. Let's put it like that. So, what did Ocon do? Well, he destroyed his chassis, front wing, rear wing, suspension, and also his engine and his gearbox, as well as his ERS, which means that we might need to buy an extra set of all of these components. The engine is 5 million, the gearbox is 6 million. If we count the aerodynamics parts, this is basically close to 1.3 million. So we started out with a pretty insane crash here. And of course, to make matters worse for us, the car parts that Ocon destroyed, namely the chassis and the suspension, are new spec parts. So what this means is that when it comes to China, he will most likely not have these parts because, well, we won't have spares. That's not really a huge problem. It is something that we can very easily deal with. Now, our first regulation change here is a pretty simple one, pretty minor one. 5% to everything or 10% to everything. Now, because of the way the AI is currently doing research and design, the bigger regulation change is going to help the player more. And what I mean by this is that the AI is bad at research. So a 10% loss to everything, basically a 10% loss to performance for the AI, is going to hit the AI harder than a 5% loss, simply because, well, they have a higher chance of dealing with a 5% loss than 10% loss. So we're going to go with minimal regulation changes here. If you are playing to win and you don't care about that, the bigger the regulation change, the more the AI struggle, and the easier it's going to be for you as a player to deal with it, which honestly we'll be taking a look at in this video with how research works. So with that said, we're also going to go back into our facilities here. We did get some upgrades done. We still have 26 million in the bank, which is a lot of money. We're going to continue upgrading our memorabilia room here. We want to get it to level 5 for that mentality buff. Mentality is still a +8 to every stat at maximum, which is a huge amount of pace. So we're going to go ahead and upgrade the team hub. We're going to go ahead and upgrade these 3 buildings so that we get a little bit more of a mentality buff. And as you can see, as a result of this, Gasly is now enthusiastic, but we have a couple of problems we need to deal with. And honestly, renegotiating his contract would probably be a good thing. Ocon's contract as well goes out in a year, but renegotiating these contracts can actually be a good way for us right now to buff mentality, because as you can see here, currently we're having some unhappiness due to the contract salary, we're having some unhappiness due to contract bonuses. Now, in the current edition of the game, we can actually do some pretty funky stuff. We're going to be using Gasly and Ocon for this save, so I'm not going to be replacing them. We're not really going to be doing much with the affiliates, because honestly, I'm a little bit disappointed with the system, but I'm going to go over how it works in just a second. But yeah, what we're going to do here is actually boost the paychecks of both Gasly and Ocon closer to, say, 12.5 million. It's not a cost that we can't bear, and by also paying, say, a lump sum of a deadline 7 days, why can't I offer a longer deadline? That's a little bit unfortunate. Usually you can offer like a 28-day deadline, which would make it a little bit easier. But in our case here, we are going to spend probably 2 million as a lump sum bonus. Because as you can see, that bar is moving pretty quickly to the right. And you can make some pretty hilarious contracts by just offering a lump sum payment. In our case here, we're probably going to be offering 1.6 million, 1.625, just to maximize the bar. And even if I were to set this back down to, say, 100,000, we are still within the green zone. If we double this lump sum to, say, 3 or 4 million, we could sign Gasly on a 100,000 a year contract for 5 years, which, unsurprisingly, would save us a lot of money. But there isn't any real point in doing so. Financially, you are going to struggle a little bit in the first seasons, but I want to give them 12.5 million to get a mentality buff that's going to ensure that we have an easy time reaching our goals. And honestly, it just feels better to do it like this. We are going to start the contract immediately to, again, get rid of the debuffs that we're getting from the bonuses. And again, every time Gasly finishes in top 10, we'd have to pay him 750,000. So sorry, not 750, 75,000. So we'd like to avoid that as well. There we go. First contract proposal sent. It's going to cost us 3 million to do this, but again, the mentality buff might be very well worth it. And as you can see, Ocon has a similar issue with contract salary and contract bonuses. So we're actually going to go ahead here and give him a pretty much an identical contract because they have pretty much the same in terms of, performance. They're both 84 overall. They have a little bit difference in the stats, but we're going to give him a similar contract, and that should keep him happy for a while. So that is why we are doing this. And again, paying both of these guys 25 million over the course of the season does not go into cost cap, and I don't think it's something that is going to be financially difficult for us to do. Hence, why I'm going to go ahead and do this. It's basically cheaper than designing parts because again, driver stats is actually a really, really huge driver for pace. So there is a reason for doing this. You can spend the 6 million and the salary that I'm using here on other things. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think this is a good way to buff the personal situation a little bit, get that mentality up, and a +8 overall here would make Ocon a 92 driver. It would make him Max Verstappen. And the same goes for Gasly. So if we can get there, that's already a lot of our work done. Now, in terms of the current designs, we are currently running these three, and we aren't going to be running too many designs this year. But I think once we're done with the front wing and the rear wing, we're going to start looking into the designs that can give us some of that top speed we sacrificed back again. For now, though, we are going to just be making parts before we go into China, and we could rush another side suspension. We're not going to get another chassis in time, but we could get Ocon and his suspension and still keep him somewhat competitive next race weekend. So let us get along here. Gasly has accepted the new contract. We're going to go ahead and confirm that hire. And if we take a look at him now, he should be a lot happier with his current situation. He's happy with his contract salary. There's no negative for a low bonus payout because the bonus doesn't exist. Of course, you could get a bonus positive, but that isn't really going to help. And Gasly is now a lot higher rated than 84. Let's put it like that. His lowest stat is 82, and every single one of his other stats is above 84. So we're actually getting really closer to getting him into enthusiastic, and that should ensure a lot better performance going into the next few race weekends here. Again, giving drivers a new contract is probably not something I would recommend doing in the first year, but Alpine can, ironically enough, afford it. And here we go. Ocon is also going to get that very same treatment. And I know someone wanted me to pick up Doohan, have him develop, but that is not something that we're actually going to do here. Now, you can actually develop your affiliates, and I'm going to go quickly over how this works. So the way that the affiliate system works is actually pretty straightforward. You can sign a driver into the affiliate program, and that way they work as kind of a reserve for your team. They can still race in F2 and F3, and you can go in here to the development focus, and you can kind of steer their development in the way that you want. The affiliates can also take advantage of your race simulator for their get a little bit extra development. But generally, there isn't much more than that you can do. You can allow them to race in FP1, free practice 1, on race weekends where they don't have F2 or F3. But other than that, the affiliate system works pretty much similarly to reserves did. It's just that you can have more of them now. So unfortunately, not really a massive upgrade in terms of how you manage young talents. It doesn't really change anything. And also, of course, they do get mentality buffs based on, well, your car performance, other staff, facilities. So if you really want to raise talent, you're going to have to be one of the top teams anyways, because these debuffs actually has an effect on their development rate, because development rate is actually affected by mentality as well. So if you don't have an enthusiastic mentality, you're theoretically losing a lot of development for young talents that is then going to turn them into, not talents. So it's a bit of a weird situation all around. But as you can see now, we have fixed the contract salary. And while it's going to suck a little bit for Ocon in the next couple of races, as I mentioned, I don't think there's anything we can really do about that. We're going to rush and give him another suspension, but I don't think there's anything really for us to do apart from that. Can go ahead here and say make another side pod just normally. That's generally what we're going to do. We'll get a new underfloor in 4 days so we can start to manufacture, which is basically after we get this chassis done. We also do need to make him a new chassis, so yeah, it's a bit rough here now for Ocon. I'll be perfectly honest. Research period has opened. Let's take a look at what we actually got here. -5. We got the one that's going to be easier for the AI. So if we struggle this year, we can probably dominate next year even with this regulation change. But it should be a little bit better for the AI to handle the changes. Now, this also means that we do have research available to us, but we do need an engineer for that to happen. So we're going to wait 2 more days to get that underflow done. And then I'm going to take a quick look at how research works. Helipad tour center has been upgraded. We're also going to go ahead and make some continued upgrades to these buildings, the tour center and the helipad. Both of them are pretty nice to have, so there's no reason not to upgrade them. And again, they're cheap mentality buffs, which is the main reason why we are upgrading them. 1 more day here for the design. Let us speed along. Memorabilia room, level 4 has been reached, which means we're going to upgrade that one to the maximum level. And we're going to go ahead here and get this underfloor, which is going to actually be also not a sizable boost, but at this point, everything counts. So let's go ahead and get a couple of these made. And as you can see, we can actually make 2 of them normally for Miami. I would also love to get another chassis, which we can do by just starting that project after the suspension. But this does mean, as you might have surmised, that Ocon is not going to have a chassis for the next race. Now, in terms of research, the easiest way to describe this is that your goal is going to be making the best car that we can next year. And the easiest way to do this would be to say, take these sliders and focus them on, in our case, cornering. That way we'll be able to get a little bit more buff on the car next year than if we did not focus cornering. And generally, CFD and wind tunnel is better spent on research projects if you're looking for pure expertise gain. Now, we're just losing 5% this season, which isn't a lot, and our team is really, really bad. You can actually take a look at what this actually means. We go to board rules and regulations and say click the chassis. So 5% of our current expertise is 1%, 0.64. That's not a huge loss. And generally, for a very low expertise team like we are currently, 1 or 2 regular research will cancel out this loss. And this is the only way you ever lose expertise. Your staff cannot take expertise with them when they leave. You only lose it from regulation changes only. So don't worry about that. Now, the way that this also works, again, you might think that, oh, I'm only losing 2%. It's fine to do research, or rather more designs in a season like this. But I would still recommend you use CFD time on doing research. In our case, we have 4 periods left, which is probably going to go into the front wing, rear wing, underfloor, and suspension. So we'll deal with that hurdle once we actually get there. But generally, research is going to be the most efficient way to spend your money to get more performance out of the car, with the negative thing being that you have to wait until next season to take advantage of it. Okay, so with that underfloor done, let's just get the memorabilia room to max level. We can now start looking into the signs where we're going to try and get some of that top speed that we have been losing back. And in particular, let's just go ahead here and put some parts on the cars first so we actually have some proper comparisons. Let's put this on car 2. Again, it is just unfortunate for Ocon, but he's going to be driving a non-optimal car in this next race. It's just how things are going to be. That suspension actually turned out to be not Ocon's, but it is what it is. And that should be benefit Gasly this time around. Because again, Ocon got the pass last time, so we want to give it to Gasly this time. Actually, I'll get him a suspension. That's my bad. But what I was going to mention here, let's just toggle this to car 2 performance, is that if we want to try now and get some of this top speed back again, we're just going to make parts that are identical to our initial one with some added top speed. And in our case here, we can see that we're actually getting quite a lot of top speed, making me consider if I've actually done things correctly. I think I have. So if you first make a cornering setup like this, you can then make a top speed build right afterwards. And again, this has the upgraded part on it. We can see it by comparing like this. So we can get 80 kph back again, which would be a good, well, it wouldn't really boost as much on the grid, but it will be beneficial because we barely lose any of the other stats. And the way that this works is pretty straightforward and simple. Our first design is boosting low speed, tire preservation, airflow front, which is what we kind of focused on. And by doing so, we now have excess. Well, we're draining some of the expertise gain and putting it back onto the drag reduction, rather than top speed. And that's basically just, there's nothing mystical or special about this. It's basically we first make the cornering pieces, and then we make a top speed piece that's going to lose us a little bit of that gain we got for cornering and tire preservation, but it's going to give us a decent amount of top speed back. And particularly for the suspension, this works really great. Underfloor, generally it's going to be a little bit weaker. Like if we were to do something like this, it looks pretty good, but we still need to make that second one to get a proper view. We know that we have the side pods on, so we can do the same here to take a look and see if it's worth it. And generally here, we can see that we can get a good 80 back here as well, but we'd lose the net engine cooling. So if you feel like these losses aren't acceptable for you, what you can do is just do something like this, where you make another design that is very, very similar. As you can see here, we're still getting gains because our expertise is so incredibly low. So even just making a design like this is going to boost our expertise, and then we can make a drag reduction design after that if we want to. Now keep in mind, this isn't really going to work if you are doing create your team, because you are very, very financially limited. So this is basically only going to work for the top 10 teams. I have videos on dealing with your finances the first season in Create a Team. Take a look at those videos. They'll help you far more than following this video when it comes to the Create a Team car, if you will. There we go. We're going to make a new chassis that will be done for Ocon by the time we get to Miami. And now we're going to install the suspension. And with this, and the new suspension we're designing, things should be looking better once we get to the next race weekend. And as you can see here, for now, we are getting up there on cornering. And that's kind of what we're aiming for here. But we still need the front wing, we still need the rear wing. And once we get those, we're going to be a little bit more competitive. And again, this first season, the only thing we really care about is getting 6th or above. That's what we're aiming for. So with that said, let us head to China. Let's see if we can have Gasly score some points here now. We have reached enthusiastic mentality. Most of his stats are over 90. And unfortunately for us, he's maximized adaptability. So let's hope it's going to rain. But yeah, this is looking very, very promising, I dare say. So let us see what we can do. And for Ocon, his mentality too has reached enthusiastic. And while he won't be as competitive, he will still be able to be reasonably rapid, I guess you could say. Now, the main reason why it's enthusiastic is actually because we've done all the facility upgrades. They're actually helping out massively here, so make sure that when you do your facility upgrades that you kind of time it correctly. In our case, we have not, because we wanted to have this buff while both cars were kind of maxed, which we missed out on a little bit because, well, front wing rear wings aren't done yet and Ocon crashed. You kind of get the idea. You want to try and get this boost as close to, well, your first 6 parts as possible. But now that we're going to head to China, we're going to see if we can snatch some points. So unsurprisingly here for the sprint, we end up 12th and 14th. This is still a fairly acceptable gain though, and we should be able to maybe snatch some points here if I play my cards right. Remember, we currently have upgrades for Gasly, we don't have upgrades for Ocon. So let us see what we can do here. Now, in terms of sprint strategy, there isn't really much we can do, honestly. The mediums is probably going to be the best bet, and taking care of them is probably going to benefit us. The question is, do we underfuel the sprint? I think the answer to that is no, we don't. So this is going to be the play. We run a light medium, and we try and make something towards the end of it. I think that is going to be the best bet. Very boring, very straightforward, but it should be good enough that we probably won't snatch points, but maybe we'll breach top 10. And that is kind of what we are looking at here. We are going to try and get into top 10. I'm still going to go rally defend low because we are currently lacking a lot of parts. So taking care of our car by not taking risks is going to be important to us, because if we take risks, we are potentially looking at a lot of damage, kind of like Ocon last time around. So we are going to play it safe. That's the improved steer limit on the race start here, but we are just going to sit. We are going to relax, and we're going to allow our tire advantage to hopefully give us a point or two here, maybe if we're lucky. Now, when it comes to sprint races, my personal preference is to run until we get to 0.4 kilograms negative on the fuel, and then we start running balance from that point onwards. Unfortunately for us, we aren't really able to keep up with any of the top 10 teams here. Particularly Hamilton is getting away, but it's not going to stop us, as we see Bottas picking up a mechanical fault, and both Haas drivers do have damage to their cars. Not really from any incident, they've just been unlucky. So we could see some interesting things here towards the end. As we are getting close to the end of the sprint here, lap 13 out of 19, we now have basically a 24-25% advantage on tires over Rick, over Alonso, and over Tsunoda. And since we are just 6 seconds off points here, it is actually looking very, very promising that we might be able to snatch some. The question is now just, can we start pushing, or would this be too early? And I think the answer to that is start by going a little bit more aggressive. There is 6 laps remaining, so we are actually kind of running out of time to get something done. And in Gasly's case in particular, clearing Rick here pretty quickly would actually be very, very beneficial to catching up to the cars in front, getting potentially our first point here during the sprint itself. Now, there isn't really much we need to do here. We are just kind of sitting back. We're allowing our drivers to do most of the job. And in our case here, it is looking incredibly possible right now. We might need to give Gasly a little bit of a deploy here, which would help him fly by. We also see Bottas' fault evolve, which would be a bad thing if he, say, DNFs and we get a safety car. That would actually negatively affect us quite a bit. And even with our current top speed, we still fly past Rick. No problem at all. Next up, we have Alonso, who is probably not going to be difficult as well. And at this point, we can definitely go full attack till the end. And yeah, we're not really struggling with anything right now. Gasly's doing his job. Confidence is actually putting his stats to, again, the high 90s. So if we get peak confidence, Gasly is going to be, and Ocon for that matter, both of our drivers with the mentality buffs, it's going to be a Verstappen caliber driver. And that is kind of the insane part, I dare say. Now, though, I do think that we might be able to also get Ocon in the points if we're lucky, so we're going to have him push as well. And we have cleared Alonso, Hamilton, and Tsunoda are next up. 3 laps to go. And let's see what we can do with Ocon. Ocon is still pushing. I want to get him within DRS of Rick this lap if we can. And honestly, I want to have Gasly within DRS of Tsunoda and Hamilton within this lap as well. So we're going to push it a little bit more. And we are getting close to the DRS zone, but Gasly makes the move even before that. Put it back on deploy, and he should be able to chase down the Merc here, as we are about to enter one long straight DRS, and we still have basically maximum amount of energy at the moment. Hamilton goes offensive, but with the energy and DRS, no chance at all. And for Ocon here now, we need to push if we want to get him in the points as well. Now, I'm going to allow Gasly here to just keep on pushing, because if he can detach Russell and Hamilton, that would be amazing for giving Ocon any sort of chance here to getting into the points himself. And at the pace that we're currently going, 36.7 versus 39, Gasly could get Perez here too. That would be wild. But it goes again just to show just how powerful, if you will, tire saving is around Shanghai here, particularly for the sprint. Kind of similar to Qatar. There we go, Ocon. Good lad. Now you just need to get the 2 Mercs. Question is, can you do it before the end of the race here? Or the sprint, sorry. And Gasly here, it's probably going to be hard pressed to catch up to the Paris at this point. He did gain almost 3 seconds that last lap, but now we don't have energy left. That's going to make that job a lot harder. Ocon, though, he might very well score points here. And this is also incredibly promising for the race itself. Let's see what we can do. He skims around the outside of Hamilton, and now we're starting to chase down Russell. Now, Ocon does actually have a small advantage over the cars around him, and that is that he does have fresh engine and gearbox. That definitely helps. Leclerc has started the final lap here. And as you can see, Gasly, it's not really gaining too much currently. 38.5 on that last one, so we did actually end up losing time to Paris. So that is probably a little bit of a pipe dream here. And even getting Russell is going to be very, very difficult. I think we need to use our energy to defend rather than attack. And even then, I think Hamilton might get us here. But Ocon 9th, that's acceptable. That's very acceptable. And honestly, Hamilton overtaking us here is not a bad thing. So honestly, Ocon should just let him go. If you had strategy, that was. Yeah, Leclerc wins the sprint, Verstappen comes second, Sainz is going to come third. And Gasly is going to nab a surprising 7th place, which is a couple of points here, the first couple of points that we're going to be able to get. And unfortunately for Ocon, he did get out with it there by Hamilton. Should let Hamilton pass, then take him with DRS. But I'd say both cars in the top 10 is very much an acceptable result for the sprint weekend.
Switch the car off and get Wade.
That is our first 2 points of the season for Gasly, courtesy of Floof. Probably was devastated with the Ocon destruction derby last time around. Now that we are going to go through the quali, and I'm not really doing anything special for quali. The main thing that I'm doing is just trying to maintain, or rather save, as many softs as we can. And we also want to try and perform well. But generally, I'm just going to do flying lap at the beginning, middle, and end. If I do something different or something interesting, I'll be showing you. We have received a red flag here, as Sainz has put it in the wall in Q1. But it's looking very promising for us, honestly. This is going to make life a little bit easier, though. That is a really, really bad hit. That's his gearbox gone. Or anyways, it should be. That is an unfortunate incident there for the Ferraris. Now, we're just going to stick on the same soft tire because we should be safe. I don't see Sargent, Bottas, Show improving enough that they'll be able to threaten us. The gaps there are pretty big. So I would think that we are just going to be fine here. 6 minutes left of qualifying. Let's see how we end up. So unfortunately for us, quali pipped us out in 11th and 12th with the RBs, but we did beat an Aston, so that is good. But yeah, we have been pipped out by the RBs, and 11th and 10th isn't a bad place to start, honestly. The board won 6th. We are currently qualified as 6th, and this is a good starting point to keep on developing the team from. So, what do we want to do here in terms of strategy? Now, as we saw, the medium tire can be very, very useful if you run it light. And honestly, kind of tempted to try something a little bit different here with a bit of an aggressive start, which honestly isn't that different when it comes to me. But it should allow us to mess around with the strategy in a way that is going to be productive, like doing something like this, where we first burn down that hard tire as much as we can, and we go into 2 light stints. Then we work from there. Now, the one stopper here is almost quicker by 7 seconds, but I think this is going to work out just fine. And interestingly enough here, one of these cars should have 2 fresh mediums. Sorry, 2 fresh hards here, and that is Gasly. So we could try something silly, like a hard medium, which is something you don't really see a lot. And in this case, that would end up being actually a bit slower than this one, which is just 2 softs into a medium tire. So, yeah, I don't know. could be better for us to just run it like this. Could benefit us, but honestly, let's do a split strategy here, because this can work out very well. We have a little bit of tire towards the end, which means we can run attack, which we can run aggressive, do a little bit of, have a little bit more freedom with. And then we have Ocon and alternative strategies. So if we get in a safety car, anything like that, we can somewhat respond to it. Now, because the AI is going to be underfueling here, we are going to be doing the same thing. Generally, the AI underfuels for every race, and for the most part, they underfuel maximum. Now, to give us a little bit of freedom here, we are going to underfuel maximum at -1, which means we go to the as far down as we can, and then we go, well, it's actually +1, not -1, go up 1. And that should give us enough fuel that we can push for the first couple of laps, then we can slow down, play a little bit safer, conserve to get that back, while we also run conserve on the car itself. And this should also help save the engine over the course of the season, which is the main reason, honestly, that I would do this. It feels a little bit cheesy, but let's be honest, it is generally the positive strategy, and the AI does it too. So you can't really blame me for mimicking the AI in that sense. See another hard runner there, which is very interesting. It is, in fact, lights out and away we go. That's an amazing start, but unfortunately, Ocon gets blocked and doesn't actually get anything done with it. And just like we did during the sprint, we are going to go rally defend low. And again, the main reason why we do this is just because it saves us a lot of... It's going to save us a lot of grief, most likely. And that is kind of why we do the step of trying to avoid incidents before they even happen. That is the mentality, and that is why we're doing it. Now, we had a good start here. We've held on to our positions, and with that, it's going to be very interesting to see how we do things here. But for now, sit back, relax, allow this first thing to run its course. And we are going to go ahead and tune down the car now, because we have finished that first lap. So let's see how this race develops. As we're getting closer here to the final, rather end of the first stint, we see Leclerc's picked up a mechanical fault. But more importantly, we see that Ocon has suffered. He's down in 12th, Gasly's up in 6th. And honestly, there's nothing special that's going on here. Gasly is just running quite a lot quicker due to, well, for starters, he's running a soft tire versus a hard tire. But even then, he's outpacing Ocon greatly. There is some difference in components, but Ocon is just way slower, mainly due to the tire choices. So definitely putting him on the hard tire around here is not a good option. Might want to see if we can do something cheeky by, say, putting him onto additional softs, if that might be quicker than running the medium. And honestly, it might be. But yeah, it's one of those things that is slightly annoying, but I think we are going to just have to run the medium here. And honestly, we might just go ahead and pit Ocon a little bit earlier. Currently, though, he is in a good window here where he's going to come out ahead of Ricciardo, I believe. You can check that in the pre-race report. 25 seconds is what we can expect to lose here for a pit stop. So we're going to need to push a little bit if we want to get out ahead of Ricciardo. And honestly, as you can see, Rick has already pitted. So I don't think that is happening. What we could do is try and hitch a ride here with Verstappen, who we have right behind us. But honestly, I don't think that is viable either. So I think running our tires here and trying to make something towards the end of the race with our mediums and softs is going to be the best thing that we can do for Ocon in his current state. But as you can see here, the Red Bulls have pitted, and I believe we also have some other cars that have pitted. So that is why Gasly's also higher up than he kind of should be at this point. But yeah, we are gonna speed along. Now, if you're curious, this right here is the Extender UI mod. You can find an Overtake. I think it's called Race Department before. But you can find it there, and it's really easy to install. It just gives you all of these screens with more information, so you can kind of get a better idea of what's going on. And it is pretty amazing to have up there. It might be giving you a little bit too much information, you might think, but it's honestly a pretty nice addition to have. Now that we're going to speed along, we're going to get Ocon into the pits very soon. We're going to get Gasly into the pits, and we'll see how this second stint develops for us. So Gasly is just coming out of the pit stops here after his final pit stop. Ocon still has his, which means that Gasly is a pit stop and 5 seconds ahead of him, which is massive. We have Tsunoda on old hard, or rather new hards, and same here with Hamilton, Alonso, and Stroll. So currently, we're actually in a very, very good position where Gasly has potential here of scoring in 8th place to get another few points for the team. We should also be able to catch Russell here. He still has to pit. Don't think we're catching any of the top 6, but Russell is definitely doable. And as you can see, we also have some new faults here developing. Show, Magnus and Rick, Leclerc still has his, so we could still see some safety cars or some other shenanigans causing issues. And in our case here for now, I think we're going to have Ocon push and try and make something out of this still as well. But it's going to be a really, really hard time for him, I think, to get back up into 10th. But we have hopes and dreams. He has a soft stint. Anything could happen. And so we're getting towards the end of this race here. We find ourselves in a position where Gasly is squeezed between Russell and Tsunoda. We've also just picked up a minor gearbox fault, which makes things a little bit spicier. Let us see exactly what this fault is before we raise our white flag. So, oh, yikes! Driver reaction down, incident risk up. That's not what you want on the last couple of laps of a race where we need to get an overtake on Tsunoda. Yeah, I would like to avoid that. To be fair, though, we still have a couple of laps left after this, which is kind of bad. So I don't think we have enough tyre to get to the end here. So I might need to turn down the tyre usage slightly. Honestly, let's just keep on pushing, see if we can get away from Russell. It's a gamble, but let's face it, the gearbox, as in its current form, is a ticking time bomb that I would love to avoid. So we are going to be pushing. Ocon is down in 13th. Unfortunately, no way of getting him back into the points here. He is a good, well, 20 seconds or so off. So he made an honorable attempt, but that hard tire stint kind of ruined everything for him. And we also do need to make sure here now that we don't, destroy Gasly. We are a minute behind the leaders, which means that we are just now about to start our final lap. And honestly, if we get overtaken here, it wouldn't be a bad thing, really, because that means we can come back against Russell later on. Hopefully. Tires are going as well, so we did start pushing a little bit too soon. But at this point, there's not really much we can do. And I think, unfortunately, that is going to be Russell just kind of eking ahead here and making us unable to catch him. Ocon has finished. He finished 13th, which isn't too shabby. But it is a bit of a disappointment to not get that 7th place. It is still very much acceptable, and I think if Ocon had the chassis here, he would have performed also a lot better. But yeah, looks like we are going to come in 8th place in China. That is, honestly, very much an acceptable result for us. Very much so. So let's stay away from hards next time. That does give us another 4 points, which puts us with 6 points now on Gasly. Puts him in 11th. And we are now up into 7th place. A little bit behind RB. But with a couple more performances like this, and also, of course, the front wing and the rear wing, we should be seeing ourselves beating RB fairly comfortably. Side pod have been manufactured, which is also good. It's just an extra pod, really. And let's look at the underfloor here. It has failed, which is not a good thing, but we're going to get new underfloors for both cars anyways. Going into Miami. And in Gasly's case, this gearbox fault did in fact become permanent. We'll have to take a look at it, see exactly what it does. This says minor fault right now, so we'll have to take a look at it. But most likely we're going to just switch it out in Miami. I think that is the easiest way to deal with that. It's just the underfloor that failed, so let us see here what we can do in terms of manufacturing. Front wing, I think we'll just leave that manufacturing slot open. I think that's going to be the best bet, unless we rush something. Because I would love to get the front wings done, so in time for Miami. And that's kind of what we're going to go for here. So let's just keep this manufacturing slot open for now. We're going to get the underfloors. We're going to get the new front wings. We're going to get the extra chassis, and that means that both cars are going to be upgraded with only one thing missing. Should make us a lot more competitive, really. Helipad upgrade complete, which means we do another one. The dynamic testing period is ending, and we are going to go ahead here and invest our next CFD period into research. It is just the best way to progress. And again, we don't really want to go all for broke here in the first season. We're going to play this one a little bit slower. So we're going to focus research. Now we're going to go ahead and rush this first front wing to make sure that we get both done, because Miami is a sprint weekend, so we need to get them done in time. And as you can see, this is going to bump us up 10 places in the low-speed cornering department, so this is going to be a huge, huge gain. So let's get that first one rushed. Then we'll make the other one when we have the opportunity. I also think we should probably start making some other components here, in this case a suspension. And we are also going to go ahead and make another front wing design, because we invested CFD time into the previous one. And if you remember, we were getting about 120 gain there on the low speed. That has now been up to 155, and we're no longer losing tire preservation or dirty air tolerance. And the reason why this is happening is because we use CFD time. It gives us a huge boost in performance for the second design after you make the first one. So that is why if you spend all your CFD time, all your wind tunnel time on one part, one design, you're going to get a much larger boost that part if you spread it out on 4 different designs. Rather than doing that, I would recommend that you say put all your CFD time into your underfloor, then your rear wing, then your front wing, then your suspension, rather than equally splitting time between several parts. Rather just assign one period to that part, and you'll get a pretty significant boost. In this case, a fairly huge one. We're going to put 6 engineers on this. We're going to run normally because we just want to get this as quickly as possible. And getting it before we go to Monte Carlo would be perfect, honestly, but looks like that isn't going to be the case unless we rush the project. And for this one, we're actually going to go ahead and do it, but keep in mind, rushing it is going to increase the cost by 1.5 times. So it's going to be expensive for our money, and it's going to be expensive for the cost cap. Don't do any rush designs on Creative Team, but it's perfectly fine here. We have a lot of cost cap to play with, so if you have the finances for it in the regular 10T mode, knock yourself out, have fun. Again, I am kind of harping on this, but I just want to be absolutely clear that there is no confusion in in basically how we handle this, just to be on the absolute safe side. Okay, Victor Martins have improved, Aini has improved, and we have our new ATR period, which we're going to use on research. We're just going to have to wait for a slot to open up. Tall center and front wing is also finished. We're going to keep on upgrading, and we're going to manufacture the next front wing normally, and we're going to make 2 of them just so we have a spare lying around. That is kind of important as well. Rear wing is going to be done in 10 days. Sideboard suspension, again, this is going to be something we put on a car. This one's going to need 1 more iteration before we use it. Okay, let us speed along here to Miami, and I think today we're going to do Miami, and we're probably also going to do Imola, but we'll probably leave Monte Carlo for next time. We'll have to see. Depends on how much time we have. And 1 point overtaking for Gasly, we'll take that. Now again, I know that my philosophy here is probably something a lot of people disagree with, but I prefer to just get this error chance down. And now that we're getting closer to 8% or so, I think this is when we start to consider investing into getting that pit stop time down, because it is actually going to mean something further down the line. So let us start investing a little bit into it. And hopefully we don't run into too many pit stop issues. Can still happen, let's be honest, but because the pit stop time has gotten that high, I think this is when we start to cut down a little bit on it. And again, just make sure that before you go into race weekend, you are as close to, well, at least single digit in terms of fatigue. So that come Sunday, you don't go into that 3rd bar, because that is going to mess up your pit crew terribly. That is kind of something that we would like to avoid, if possible. There we are, pit crew training for this month. Okay, we still need to do that last front wing. We're going to be getting it in time for the race, so let's just go to the race weekend, put the new parts in the car, and see how we look in terms of performance. And we are getting into financial worrisome area. 12 million in the bank. That's more than enough though, so it's not really a big deal. Put the 2 new underfloors on, put the new front wings on, and we're also going to go ahead and give car 1 the chassis. With this, we are looking very, very good. Now we just need to get that extra rear wing. And if we take a look now at car analysis, we are now the undisputed #1 team in close cornering, or rather low speed cornering. We're still lacking top speed, but this is going to make us a lot more, we're going to be a lot more competitive. To be fair, we might be first, but I don't think there's really a big difference. Yeah, we're first by 0.003. So we're not going to be very competitive against the three top teams, Ferrari, McLaren, or Red Bull. They just have too much of an advantage in the other types of cornering, in top speed, in basically everything else. So even if we have, on paper, the best car for low-speed cornering, it doesn't actually mean that we are beating those three teams. So do keep that in mind before we go into this race weekend. And honestly, once we get the rear wing, it's going to be looking a little bit better. But still, if we can be the fourth best team when it comes to low-speed corner, or rather, if we can be the fourth best team when it comes to cornering in the first year, that's going to massively help us, both in terms of financial payouts, but also in terms of actually scoring points and making the board happy. For now, though, let's just get through practicing quali and see how we do in the sprint. Now, I just want to make this absolutely clear, and that is that once you start getting faults in your components, a yellow minor fault here isn't anything super terrible, but I'd still go ahead and switch to a fresh gearbox if you can. You want to kind of try and use these later on in the season if we have to, but it's still going to hamper our performance, and we do want to try and avoid that. And at this point too, we can also employ a fresh engine, and the reason for this is also very simple. This one is still very much usable. You can use these until they turn orange, but by using a fresh one, we're going to be a lot more competitive. And we have now, going into Miami, kind of entered that timing of the season where the AI is going to start struggling with powertrain component issues, faults, things like that. So we want to ensure that if, say, both Red Bulls, both Ferraris, or both McLarens, any combination of those, DNF due to issues, that we don't end up in that same boat and that we can take advantage of their trouble. So that is kind of why I would recommend, again, buy Miami, switch to healthier components, and if you need to at the end of the season, unless you really, really need to win some points, it's fine to use those, sandbag a little bit, just kind of survive the last 5-6 races without worrying about where you place. That is absolutely acceptable. But for now, we're still going to try and score some early points, and that is why we're switching components here. So we found ourselves in a bit of an interesting situation here with a couple of mechanical faults evolving. And in this case, it's Rick's fault, and it is Hulkenberg's fault that has evolved from yellow level to orange level. And we can kind of take a look at it here. That is an engine error, and for Hulkenberg, it is a gearbox error, which is going to slow them down, and potentially, you could get a safety car. Now, we also find ourselves in a very peculiar situation here. Sorry. If I remember to cut that out, I will. I might not. Apologies. But as we can see here, Gasly is currently running 5th. Ocon is running 8th. We currently have both cars in the points. We have a tire offset advantage. I am tempted to try and chase down Leclerc with 5 laps remaining, but lap time wise, I don't think that is really doable. He's running a second faster than us at the moment. And honestly, at this point, 5th and potentially 6th here, if we can do that with Ocon, would be amazing. So we are not going to take any risks here of chasing down Leclerc for a fairy tale ending. There's still 5 laps remaining. Degradation is pretty rough around here. So we're probably going to go ahead on this lap, tune up to aggressive. Run this for a couple laps, and then we go full on attack. Gasly does have a chance at hunting down Leclerc, which would be one heck of a scalp to take. But I think it's going to be difficult, and particularly in Ocon's case, he still is fighting Hamilton. It is still back and forth, and if we want to help him, the best way we can do that is actually by using ERS here to catch Paris. That would actually be the best way that we can help Ocon in this current situation defend himself against Hamilton. But we're also seeing some 38-1 tires. Potentially here, we could see some punctures if fate allows, which would be hilarious. And I think also we're going to give Gasly here now the go-ahead to just go a little bit more on the offensive. Try and make something happen. There is going to be 3 laps remaining after this one. I think we have just about enough tire to make this work. Probably would benefit us to have like 3 or 4% more. But I want to launch these attacks and try and make something happen for our boys. And just as I say that, we have Ocon actually overtaking Paris. And if he can get Russell now, that would help us out a ton. Gasly's getting ready to attack Leclerc. And honestly, Leclerc has... I have no idea how he's 10 seconds behind the top 3 here. But he's somehow found himself in this position, and we are now taking advantage of the fact that he's now in this position. Ocon chasing down the Mercedes. Should be able to make it happen any second now. And while we look away, Gasly gets the overtake on the Ferrari. And honestly, at this point, I think we just go neutral. We need to... No, we deploy. We try and get away from Leclerc. We don't give him DRS. We don't give him any chance of getting back into this. We push. We run away. And we give Ocon the chance to also hunt down Leclerc, which would be a double scalp, which would be kind of insane. So let's see what we can do here. Now, unfortunately for us, Gasly has run out of energy. So we only have fuel and tire now to create a gap. And it looks like we are just a little bit too slow to make this happen, unfortunately. So Gasly's going to have to try his darndest, but I don't think it's going to be enough. And we've also used what little fuel we had. So let's see now what we can do. Magnussen's mechanical fault has also evolved, which is putting both Haas in the dirt at the moment. And in the insane event that we have a mechanical, rather function for Verstappen and Norris, things could turn pretty nasty here still. Ocon has run out of energy, so we're going to tune him down. Unfortunately, Leclerc still were able to keep up with Gasly, which is pretty detrimental to us. Could have started pushing a little bit earlier as we're looking at the tires, but honestly, pushing too early and running out of tire is almost worse than having too much left over at the end. And let's face it, 4th, 6th, still huge for us. Perez down in 8th, Piastri down in 10th. Both Astons down in 12th and 13th. This is a pretty wild race so far. So let us see what we can do here towards the end. I do need Gasly now to give everything that he has to get past Leclerc, as he has re-overtaken Gasly. Can we get this with the help of DRS and energy? Or is Leclerc just flying a little bit too fast for us here? I think the answer is he's a little bit too fast for us, unfortunately. But even with that said, 5th is more than acceptable. And getting Ocon in here in 6th is also more than acceptable. And we'll have to see if we can
Good driving out there.
see if we can do this again, rather, in the race itself. Yeah, 5th and 6th, very straightforward and simple. We took care of our tires. That allowed us to get an advantage, which we then used to launch an attack towards the end. Works very well when there isn't DRS training back and forwards. Okay, we are going to have some rain for the race itself, which could backfire for us. Our weather center isn't the best, but we'll see what we can do. Going to get qualifying done with. So, quali in Miami did go kind of as expected. 10th and 7th, with the RB squeezed in between, which puts Mercedes in a bit of an awkward position alongside Sainz. So, there is a lot of cars out of position currently, which is going to make this probably a little bit harder than it needs to be. But I could see us scoring points again with this setup. So, what is the weather looking like? Inters the entire way. Excuse me. Yes, Inters the entire way, and running Inters on aggressive, or even full attack if we can get away with it, would be beneficial. Honestly, just straight up beneficial. So, let's see what we can do here. We're going to go maximum underfuel. We're going to be pushing at the start, because if it's wet weather, you can do that for probably 4 or 5 laps. Because again, wet weather, you regain fuel faster. Or rather, it's not that you regain fuel faster, it's that you don't use as much fuel to get around the track. So we are going to try here, initially, to make up as many spaces as we can. And if we see the temperature of our inters get too high, we're going to have to back off, run aggressive. You get the idea. Let us see what we can do here. This attack strategy might be scuffed though. We'll have to see. Lights out, away we go. Could this be a good run for Ocon? I think we're going to gamble on actually having high overtake aggression this race. And see if we can get ourselves into a few better positions here by just straight up pushing the car to its limits early on. We're already 15 kilograms, basically negative, which is fine, but we are going to push as long as we have ERS and as long as we have temperature to work with. If we can get Gasly ahead of both RBs, as Ocon is just flying up the track, he is now ahead of Hamilton even. That would be an added bonus. Gets Hamilton into the corner, beautiful. And again, the main thing here now that is going to concern me is going to be temp. If it goes up to 105 degrees, we are going to have to slow down. And it looks like we are going to most likely end up close to 105 degrees, if not higher. So for the time being is fine, but if we get close to it, we're going to have to slow down. We're just not going to have a choice. As Gasly gets Rick, his first real overtake there. Beautifully done. If Ocon gets Norris, I think that would be hilarious, but yeah, 105 degrees now on the tires. This means we need to slow down. We need to manage a little bit more. That is exactly what we'll do. We'll slow down, we'll turn, conserve on for a little bit. Might have to run standard for a little bit as well. Pull these tires down because again, if we get over the maximum cap, which in this case is 105 degrees, we are going to start losing durability rapidly. And this rapid loss of durability is not a good thing at all. So we're going to have to slow down, we're going to have to manage, and we're going to put on low overtake rush now because we don't want to do any more overtakes. Although Gasly did get Tsunoda. At this point, we want to just slow down a little bit, allow the tires to cool down, and then we'll turn on attack again later. Now, as you can see here, because we've done that, we're now at risk from Hamilton. To be fair, losing a place to Hamilton wouldn't be the worst thing ever, but it's also not something that we kind of want to do. So with the temp now a little bit lower, we can tune the tires up to aggressive, and we're generally just going to run the most aggressive tire that we can while still not really losing any performance. And that is Tsunoda in a very, very bad position. If he can't get it running, that's a red flag any time of the day. To be fair though, looks like he just spun. That shouldn't be a big deal. Maybe a little bit damage to rear wing. Nope, looks fine. So if there was any damage there, it would be minor. But yes, we're going to try and manage tires now. And we're going to be pushing the rest of this first stint, regaining fuel. And maybe we can get some lucky movements towards the end. But I don't think we're getting, again, any McLaren, Ferrari, or Red Bull. Sainz deciding for far back, which is kind of why we have this benefit. And Mercedes have been shafted a little bit, just like last year. So let's see what we can do here. Now, as we have been taking things kind of slowly here, we find ourselves in a peculiar situation where we are actually catching up with the cars in front. We are running slightly faster than Perez, Piastri, not Verstappen really, but these guys are squabbling enough at the moment that we are actually catching up. And that's going to allow potentially here Ocon to make some choice moves. Gasly has also cleared Hamilton, but so has Sainz, so he might push us further down the order. But we might end up, as I mentioned here, with some unforeseen boons, if you will. Hamilton runs wide, which puts him even further behind us, making us a little bit safer. And also, everyone with the exception of Verstappen is pushing their tires harder than us at the moment. Let us see here if Ocon can, through just the power of the ERS, get Leclerc. And the answer to that is probably not on this lap, but if we let him push for a couple of laps, he's probably going to get him. And also, of course, if we turn off the engine a little bit. But we are going to just keep on pushing here, see what we can do. And potentially, Ocon at the moment might be in a podium position, particularly if we end up pitting before everyone else. So let us see what we can do with this. So we have unfortunately not really been able to make anything happen with Ocon, because anytime we push, the tire temp gets very, very hot. But I've decided that we're going to try something a little bit different here. We're going to kind of split the strategies again. We're going to have Ocon burn up the rest of his tires right now. And then we're going to have him pit. And the idea here is going to be pretty straightforward and simple. We want him to pit. And by running the second set of tires there on standard, we're going to be hopefully able to get ourselves ahead of the other cars here, particularly Norris here, by the time that we end up pitting. Basically, we're going to try and undercut the cars ahead of us, as Gasly now has fallen down to 8th, and surprisingly, Science has caught up and overtaken us, which is just the true reality of the situation. And if we take a look at our time considerations, we need 21 seconds to pit. Ocon currently is 16 seconds, Stroll is 38, so we would love to push a little bit more here with Ocon, so when we pit, ideally, we come out ahead of Hamilton. That's going to be a little bit difficult, we need to get a couple more seconds, but for Stroll, as long as we don't have any incidents, it is definitely doable. And as you can see, these lap times are getting very, very slow at the moment. We have been seeing 44.1 in what we're running, and Stroll actually ran pretty quick that last lap. But for Hamilton, we gained a second that one, so probably 2 more laps out here for Ocon before we pit. And the best part is, by running, say, in front of Perez here, we're actually slowing him down too, because we are spiking the temperature on his tires. And that is going to help us out in the long run. So what we're going to do now, this is going to be the final lap before we pit. We want to push as hard as we can. So we're going to use ERS here on the in lap. We're going to push very, very hard. Hopefully we can get Perez re-overtaken here on this lap. So that would help us out as well. Probably not going to really happen. And I think also now we start pushing Gasly. Gasly too can now start pushing before he pits. But as the current status is, worst case scenario, we end up with 7th and 8th place. Which again is pretty huge. That makes us the 4th best team on the grid. We are going to get onto a fresh set of Inter tires, and as you can see already, a fresh set of Inters should be about 2 seconds faster, as Bottas' mechanical fault has evolved, and we see Tsunoda being the first car into the pits. So we might already be a little bit late with this pit stop strategy. Hopefully we can again get Perez, maybe even Norris if we're lucky, but they too should be pitting before long, and as such, this might not work out to our advantage. Now though, we're going to be a little bit curious about how where Ocon comes out after this stop. In terms of lap times right now, he should beat, again, Stroll. Hamilton if we're lucky. So let us have a clean stop. 2.6 seconds. Hamilton is currently flying down the main straight. Ocon comes out just barely ahead of him. We're going to run attack here now for just a little bit, get a little bit heated in the tires, and then we're going to turn them standard. Because let's face it, these tires should be a lot quicker than anything anyone else has on the track right now. And that's kind of what we're banking on. Even if we run standard, we should be faster than everyone else. And that is the idea here. We undercut Norris, we undercut Perez, and by the time they pit, we should come out ahead. Right now, we have already undercut Perez. He's 21 seconds, remember? And we're getting very close to getting Norris as well. Perez did respond, though, and actually pitted immediately. So let's go ahead and deploy. Let's go ahead and go attack. And we need to push now for Ocon, as Perez has already gotten the new tires on. I think that means that Perez has unfortunately beaten us out here, and he's going to come out ahead. Yo, we just barely undercut him there. Remember, Perez was ahead of us before the stop. We're ahead of him after the stops. That is an undercut. Very, very good. Now, for Gasly here, he's also pushing, and because he's pushing, he might be able to undercut the Ferraris if we're lucky. It's going to highly depend on where they pit, though. I want to kind of take care of these tires a little bit more. But honestly, pitting now in an attempt to undercut the Ferraris isn't the worst idea ever. And unfortunately for Ocon here, he's probably going to end up losing some time due to the fight with Perez behind him. But let's see what we can do with Gasly. If he can pit in a timely manner. Sainz is pitting. Potentially we could jump Norris. You can kind of see it there. So we're definitely jumping Sainz for Ocon. We're still running side by side with Perez here. Should be getting more confident too from kind of fighting him. Gasly with a 2.9. That's not a clean stop. But we come out ahead of Stroll. We come out in a bunch of fresh air. The question now is just, can we undercut Leclerc? So all in all, it's looking very, very good now. Let's see how things look once we get closer to the end.
Now what happened there, Karun?
We actually have a pit stop error here that helped us out. Norris has finally elected to pit. As you can see, his back rear took a little bit longer to get off. And as a result, both Ocon and Perez have now jumped Norris. And if we keep this up, We're also going to be in range here to jump Piastri. So all in all, things looking very good. And again, it's just going to keep on being Inter, so everything is looking nicely in that regard too. Unfortunately for Gasly, it was not enough to jump Leclerc here. And Ocon is going to be still just fighting Perez. Potentially to the detriment of his confidence, but even so, being able to feud with Perez here is not necessarily a bad thing. And we are apparently not done yet. We're going to try and get past him again. Piastri is in the pit though. Looks like maybe a little bit of a slow stop there for Piastri as well. And we might be seeing ourselves do an overtake on him. And we do. Piastri comes out behind Norris. Ocon is now running for a podium position. Potentially P2 behind Perez. Question is, can we hold off both Ferraris and both McLarens? Unfortunately for us here, Ocon doesn't really have a car that is going to allow us to fight. He has been overtaken by everyone. Confidence has suffered as a result. I think what we're going to have to do here is just try and manage tires, see if we can maybe do some sort of comeback towards the end. But honestly, the cars ahead are just a little bit too good. The drivers are just a tad better. And as a result, we have a very, very hard job here with trying to keep that 6th place for Ocon. So slow down, manage tires, and try and maybe get Perez by the end here, I think is going to be our best bet at scoring a position higher than where we're at currently. So we'll try and do that. Again, we're not really left with much of a choice. Let's see how we can turn the tides here. We are getting increasingly close to the end here. We have Ocon running in 6th. We have Gasly running in 8th. And we are actually getting a little bit close to the cars in front. Perez has burnt off his tires pretty significantly. It's down to 43% compared to the rest of the grid here. And even if we push Ocon, it might be a little bit too late to launch any sort of an attack. But Gasly might be able to snatch some points off Leclerc here. And if Ocon could get Perez, then potentially we can get Piastri. I kind of doubt this is going to happen though. Pretty simply due to the fact that we're pretty far behind to start off with. And also, while tires do matter here, I don't think it's going to matter enough that we can kind of close this gap. 38.2 is what Perez did last lap. It's pretty quick. He is being kind of hampered though by Piastri, who did a 39.6. So while it isn't completely unbelievable that we can make this happen, it is going to be incredibly, incredibly difficult. We have better chances with Gasly, and that's kind of what we're going to focus on. But you can already see here that we are burning these tires up. And again, 105 degrees is kind of the maximum, so we don't want to go over that. We get a extreme amount of extra degradation, and you also do lose a little bit of performance. So if you go over 105 degrees, you are kind of going to have to slow down to rectify that. As Verstappen has now a major fault, I would assume that means then that he's going to have a gearbox failure, potentially, if he smells some weird fluid. So, no, it's engine. My bad. Engine failure potentially incoming there for Verstappen. That's going to make things a little bit spicier here. Come on, Gasly. Send it. You can get Leclerc. That would make me immensely happy. But yeah, Verstappen could cause safety car. Same for Show and Bottas. So there is starting to be some issues here with parts malfunctioning. And that is, of course, going to play a bit of a role here towards the end of this race. We're going to turn Gasly down to aggressive, see if we can manage ourselves ahead of Leclerc. But yeah, no way Ocon is catching Perez, unfortunately, at this pace. Perez could end up with a puncture, though, so never say never. But I do kind of doubt it. For now, though, we're going to try and have Gasly manage ahead of Leclerc, heat up his tires, and hopefully stay ahead of him for the next 5 laps. And we have a safety car here. I don't know exactly what has happened, but we're running 6th and 7th at the moment, so it's not a bad thing. 2 laps remaining, though, which means that the race is basically over here. That is fire at the back of Bottas' car. That is him straight up out. Not too surprising that is a safety car, but it has also saved Gasly here as he's been able to now keep his position. And honestly, 6th and 7th, I'll take it. It's not a bad result. We haven't really had too many fights, but I'll be perfectly honest here. If we didn't get this safety car, I do believe that by the end of this, Gasly would lose out to Leclerc. So we'll take this. This is the final lap under the safety car. It is ending, which means that in theory we could get a little bit of speed here towards the end. But it's not going to happen. You can't overtake before the
Safety car.
for the line. So that is us finishing 6 and 7 here. That is very, very good. I think that is unfortunately all that we're going to have time for. I've recorded quite a bit here, and these two races have been kind of interesting, and also to some degree educational, so I'm going to be keeping most of them in the video. But with that said, again, this is more of a new player's guide, more of a follow along and play with as you will. So if there's any questions, let me know, and the next part should be out in 2-3 days most likely. We'll have to see. I'll be aiming at, for the time being, to do kind of alternating videos, where one is going to be this series, the next one is going to be a guide or a tutorial of some sort, maybe some other game, and then we'll be going back to this series until I've done basically all the tutorials there is. But yes, this is a good result. And again, if there's any questions on how we then do things here, feel free to ask. There's no problem with that. I'll try and do my best to respond. And with this, we're actually now into top 5, starting to chase down Mercedes, or top 4, which honestly is where I think we're going to end this season, all things considered. With that said, though, been a pretty good race. I think we can be very, very happy with that. And let's face it, these contracts that we have had them sign isn't going to make money this year. And honestly, I think the main benefit that we're getting is, again, the enthusiastic boost here from not only the personal standings results now, but at this point we've reached a kind of, how should I put this? We've reached a level where our mentality is just getting boosted by things like results that we're getting mainly because of mentality, more so than anything else. And as long as we can keep this roll going, keeping both of our drivers enthusiastic to score even better results shouldn't be too difficult. And that is kind of why mentality is such a weird system currently in the game. Because if you can have a good rolling mentality, no one can do anything with you. You are basically very, very dominant, if you will. So, yeah, there you have it. But yeah, as said, I would love it if you would be kind enough to tell me if there's anything you're curious about. We also get a lucky suspension reduced deadline here. Still gonna look at it before Imola. Well, we can rush one before Imola, but that isn't really that important. And I am gonna end it here today, unfortunately, just 2 races, but again, I feel like they've kind of been important to show the growth of the team already. It doesn't take long before you are more competitive, even with a team like Alpine. And in our case here, we're going to be more competitive in 4 days, and then more in 5 days. So it's all looking good. 2 weeks. Well, 2 weeks and we'll have another front wing. So things are looking good, but we'll take a look at that next time. And again, if there's anything in particular that I missed, anything that I haven't explained enough, let me know. I know, again, I harp on this a lot, but the point of this is to kind of help other players a little bit while I do a playthrough. So let me know what you think. Hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you around next time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.